You're going to have two texts that you have to read for responding to the prompt. It says, read the article in the memoir about an Antarctic expedition, then answer the questions that follow. This article describes how Ernest Shackleton's second attempt to explore the Antarctic ended in near disaster. This article is called Shipwrecked. Explorer Ernest Shackleton's ship, SS Endurance, is trapped by ice in the Weddell Sea during his second expedition to the Antarctic. In this photo from 1915. When Ernest Shackleton packed for his trip to Antarctica in July 1914, he seemed ready for anything. Among the items he and his crew stowed in his ship were cans of meat, a miniature pool table, a banjo, lanterns, a bicycle, and soccer balls. Shackleton hoped to become the first person to travel across the frozen continent at the bottom of the world. But nothing could have prepared Shackleton or his crew for what did happen. Instead of crossing Antarctica, they made history in one of the most incredible survival stories ever. Stuck in miles of ice. Shackleton was already famous when he prepared for the 1914 trip. In 1908, he had come within 100 miles of the South Pole, but had turned back because of bad weather. By 1914, he was eager for another adventure. Nearly 5,000 people volunteered to go with him. Shackleton chose a crew of 26 sailors and scientists, plus a photographer, Frank Hurley. On the way to Antarctica, Shackleton picked up at least 69 sled dogs to pull the explorers on the long trek across land. Shackleton's last stop before heading to Antarctica was a whaling station on South Georgia Island. Norwegian whalers told the crew that it was a bad year for ice. They were right. Upon entering the Weddell Sea, Shackleton was forced to zigzag through dangerous ice sheets, sometimes passing more than 400 icebergs a day. On January 18, 1918, the ice closed around the ship. It was stuck, as one sailor put it, like an almond in the middle of a chocolate bar. Although he was less than 100 miles from Antarctica, Shackleton soon realized that he could not possibly cross the continent that winter. The crew would just have to wait. Fighting boredom and cold. As the ship slowly drifted with the ice, the sailors played cards, listened to records, held singing contests, or got silly haircuts. On the snow outside, the men built fancy dogloos with porches and domes. Some even slept with the dogs for warmth. Meanwhile, Hurley kept busy taking photos. He often braved the cold while others stayed inside. Photographer Frank Hurley, right here, and Ernest Shackleton, right here, sit in front of a tent on the ice floe after leaving their ship in the Weddell Sea. So there they are on the ice. The ship was locked in ice for 10 months. By October 1915, the ice was crushing its thick wooden walls. It was a sickening sensation, Shackleton wrote in his diary. He ordered the crew to leave. They grabbed what they could, including 150 of Hurley's precious photos. A heroic rescue. The sailors struggled to reach land on 3 lifeboats they dragged across ice and rowed through frigid waters. They shivered in their thin coats, which often froze solid. At times, they had to crawl through slush to avoid sinking. While killer whales swam around them, Shackleton and his men ate penguin and burned sea blubber for fuel. Eventually, the crew landed on Elephant Island, but it was deserted. So Shackleton bravely set out again with 5 of his strongest men. They sailed and rowed 800 miles in a tiny boat, battling high waves, winds, and severe thirst. Finally, they landed at South Georgia Island, where they almost died climbing jagged peaks for 3 days before reaching the whaling station. The thought of those fellows on Elephant Island kept us going, said Shackleton. 4 months after Shackleton sailed away, one of the men on Elephant Island spotted a ship offshore. When it came closer, the crew recognized Shackleton. They began to laugh and hug. They were rescued! To the world's amazement, all 28 members of the Endurance expedition arrived home safely. How? Many say it is because Shackleton was a true hero. As the explorer said, if you are a leader, you've got to keep going. Shipwrecked by Time for Kids staff from Time for Kids website. So that was the article by Time for Kids staff. Now we're going to read an excerpt from Sir Ernest Shackleton's memoir. So in this excerpt from Sir Ernest Shackleton's memoir, Shackleton is making his fourth attempt to save the remainder of his crew, which is stranded on Elephant Island. Accompanying him are members of his crew, including Captain Frank Worsley, Second Officer Tom Crean, and some Chilean sailors. When they arrive, they are greeted by Frank Wild, second in command, who had remained behind with the rest of the crew. A Memoir of the Endurance Voyage by Ernest Shackleton. The weather was showing some signs of improvement, and I begged the Chilean government to let me have the Yelcho for a last attempt to reach the island. She was a small, steel-built steamer, quite unsuitable for work in the pack, but I promised that I would not touch the ice. The government was willing to give me another chance, and on August 25th, I started south on the fourth attempt at relief. This time, Providence favored us. The little steamer made a quick run down in comparatively fine weather, and I found as we neared Elephant Island that the ice was open. A southerly gale had sent it northward temporarily, and the Yelcho had her chance to slip through. We approached the island in a thick fog. I did not dare to wait for this to clear, and at 10 a.m. on August 30th, we passed some stranded bergs. Then we saw the sea breaking on a reef, and I knew that we were just outside the island. It was an anxious moment, for we had still to locate the camp, and the pack could not be trusted to allow time for a prolonged search in the thick weather. But presently the fog lifted and revealed the cliffs and glaciers of Elephant Island. I proceeded to the east, and at 11:40 a.m., Worsley's keen eyes detected the camp, almost invisible under its covering of snow. The men ashore saw us at the same time, and we saw tiny black figures hurry to the beach and wave signals to us. We were about 1.5 miles away from the camp. I turned the Yelcho in, and within half an hour reached the beach with Crean and some of the Chilean sailors. I saw a little figure on the surf-beaten rock and recognized Wild. As I came nearer, I called out, "Are you all well?" And he answered, "We are all well, boss." And then I heard 3 cheers. Some of the hands were in a rather bad way, but he had held the party together and kept hope alive in their hearts. There was no time to exchange news or congratulations. I did not even go up to the beach to see the camp, which Wild assured me had been much improved. A heavy sea was running, and a change of wind might bring the ice back at any time. I hurried the party aboard with all possible speed, taking also the records of the expedition and essential portions of equipment. Everybody was aboard the Yelcho within an hour, and we steamed north at the little steamer's best speed. So that was an excerpt from Ernest Shackleton's memoir. So if you need to go back and pause this or reread, you may do so.